carpool 4 friends to school every day. We had buckets of fun, and all of a sudden we came up with this brilliant idea, and we did this by posing 2 questions. Firstly, would it be possible for us to fit in the trunk and close it? The answer we discovered to this question is actually yes. In fact, 3 of us can fit semi-comfortably in the locked trunk. From that moment on, we became ninjas of the night, ding-dong ditching cookies to those friends and families who weren't a part of our carpool, but we had noticed had a need. You see, it doesn't matter if people can see your car, which is, pretty obvious betrayal of who you are, if you're hiding in a locked trunk, and it makes them way more likely to trust that mysterious plate of cookies that shows up on their doorstep. Even though we could easily escape via the emergency release latch in the trunk, it was still a tad bit outside our comfort zones. But it was amazing to make people smile, and the rush of joy that we experienced kept us running back for more. I wasn't always the happiest person when I went to pick people up for our nightly activities of dropping off cookies. However, despite what had been bugging me before, this activity of service helped me overcome whatever I'd been dealing with, and I was happier than ever after it. These little acts of service helped me overcome whatever I'd been dealing with, no matter what it was. And this idea of optimism, of keeping a positive attitude despite what was going on in my life, led me to reach out more to others in my community, to do more service for everyone in my community. I believe that, contrary to popular belief, happiness is a choice that we make. It's not something that's given based on status or wealth. The old adage that money doesn't buy happiness is not only true, but is dead on. Because if money bought happiness, then Americans by far should be some of the happiest people in the world, as we are blessed with bounties of material wealth and possession, when others struggle for basic shelter and food. And, for example, some of the happiest people I ever met were facing circumstances quite unlike what we have here. I went on a humanitarian trip to Lima, Peru, through an organization called TEDxYouth. It was to be a 2-week excursion with little to no contact with those members outside of our 20-odd-some group. And I was ecstatic to go on this trip, to help people who were facing circumstances unlike what we have here in an unforgiving world of poverty. And we're going to be building a public medical center, which would be providing service to hundreds, if not thousands of people in the area. But, as I'm sure you guys are all aware, sometimes things don't go exactly as planned, sometimes not even close. You see, our group, lucky number 3, had by far the worst track record of all the Lima, Peru groups that year, and quite frankly, probably beyond that. There were at least 4 cases of major illness, 3 cases of missed international flights, 2 cases of lost luggage, one of which was my own, and a partridge in a pear tree. If anything could go wrong, believe me, it did. There was at one point a car wreck caused by our beloved bus driver, and though the damage was mainly superficial, it was just the icing on the cake for us. I especially had a difficult time during this trip. I normally don't get homesick, nor do I get anxiety. However, between losing my luggage on my domestic flight, not being able to contact my parents, and experiencing a fair amount of bullying on that trip, I was definitely rethinking my decision to go. So, you think when asked that I would say I had a less than enjoyable time with all that stacked against me. And the answer is no, I actually really did enjoy that trip. I look back upon it favorably. Even though that first week wasn't fantastic to start, I still woke up each day hopeful that it would be better. I focused on why I was really there, not to make new friends as much as I wanted that to happen, not to see the side, but to help people who were facing circumstances unlike anything I had ever faced. I channeled my energy into service, and by the start of the second week, things started to get better. I managed to find a couple of friends in that group who would never listen to those people who had said I was someone to be ignored. I even managed to convince some of those people in my group who had initially ignored me by one simple act of kindness and reaching out. And my luggage was eventually found and returned to me. But none of this would have mattered, though, if I hadn't changed my mindset from being a victim of my circumstances, trapped in my comfort zone, to having the power to change them. It was by changing my perspective to one more positive and optimistic, that I was able to reach out to others in kindness each and every day, and change the end result of that trip. I chose to be happy, and to this day, I still look upon that trip with memorable fondness and attribute it to who I am today. But, goodness gracious, it's often said that we as youth haven't hit the real world yet. But what is that? The real world? Or does that mean I've been prancing around in some sitcom this whole time without even knowing? It's said that we as youth have not faced real problems, such as finding a job, caring for a family, or even facing physical and mental ailments. But a problem, a real problem that youth face in growing numbers is mental illness. And according to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, approximately 20% of youth aged 13 through 18 deal with a mental illness of some sort. That's approximately 1 in 5, and I'm willing to bet that you, or someone you know, at least knows someone that has a mental illness. Suicide is the 3rd leading cause of death in youth aged 10 through 24. And do you know how many of those youth had an underlying mental illness? Approximately 90%. Mental illness is a serious problem, and it's one that youth face. I've lived with and seen friends and family members struggle with mental illness my entire life. Most of them were diagnosed under the age of 18 as well. It's not possible to see anorexia as trivial when it drives someone to look at themselves in a mirror and honestly say to themselves that they aren't beautiful because they don't fit a mold. It's not possible to see anorexia as trivial when it drives someone to starve themselves in a desperate attempt to change because they honestly believe that they aren't beautiful, that they're too fat, and no one will ever love them because of that. And they feel this desperate desire to change, to be perfect. For the purposes of this presentation, I'm going to keep focusing on anorexia. It's what I have the most experience with. I know it best. And to make sure that everyone is on the same page, I'm going to give a crash course on what it means to be anorexic. Anorexia nervosa is an eating disorder characterized by a cycle of self-starvation. Typically, those diagnosed with the disorder are at a significantly low body weight. However, it is possible to be atypically anorexic or have the physical, mental, and psychological symptoms of anorexia without being at a significantly low body weight. Therefore, it is impossible to distinguish who may or may not have anorexia based on physical appearance alone. There are dozens of symptoms of anorexia, but some of the more commonly recognized ones are that significantly low body weight, avoiding eating in front of people, following very specific eating rituals, having an intense fear of gaining weight, and compulsively exercising. Of course, all of these symptoms lead to a person having major physical and psychological impacts and consequences. Some of these include an increased risk to being diagnosed with depression and anxiety, an increased risk to self-harm and suicide. A common effect of anorexia is heart disease, which can and often does lead to death in the victim of those suffering with severe anorexia. So, how can we confront each day optimistically when we or someone we may know and love is suffering with something as seemingly insurmountable as this? It seems kind of hopeless to think that happiness could be found in times like these. However, I think I found a simple supplement to combat these hopeless feelings. Throughout this presentation, I have hinted that I myself have an underlying issue, a mental illness, and I do. It makes each day much more challenging as no one ever really knows or understands the tumult of emotions and anxieties that rage within me every day. I think it's safe to say that most people deal with either directly or indirectly a mental illness of some sort. But in my personal experience, even when a friend may know the facts and symptoms behind what I'm dealing with, that doesn't necessarily mean they know how to help me which can feel incredibly lonely. But we can choose not to be weighed down by this. We can choose to turn outward of ourselves, outside of our comfort zones, and to help someone with their problems, even if they are worse than our own, especially if they're worse than our own. We can choose, at the end of the day, instead of collapsing on the couch, to use that last scrap of energy we have, that last shred of hope remaining, to turn outwards and to help someone with their problems. We can choose to brighten someone else's day despite the darkness in our own. And I know from personal experience that the light that we bring into someone else's life will eventually be reflected back into our own. It's how my trip to Peru changed from being a daily struggle to smile to being a memorable experience that has shaped who I am today. It's how I find the drive to pick people up, to ding-dong ditch cookies, even when I'm weighed down by homework and more serious problems. And it's not always going to be an immediate effect. And sometimes it's not ever going to be an immediate effect or change. But I do know and believe that as we reach out and try to serve with kindness every day, that moment after moment, day after day, we will find joy and peace in our lives. Simply by stepping out of our comfort zones and reaching out to serve someone by ding-dong ditching a plate of cookies, we can change someone's day to be more positive. And it doesn't have to be something like ding-dong ditching cookies. There are thousands of ways you can serve people. It could be offering a sincere compliment, giving a smile, helping someone pick up their fallen books, even putting an uplifting quote on a door, on a locker door, that people can read as they walk by. There are infinite ways on how we can help uplift and serve those people in our community who have a need, which will eventually trickle back and help ourselves in our own time of need. And the joy that we receive from someone's sincere smile after serving them is more powerful and valuable than any other technique I have found to combat any kind of struggle, be it a mental illness or a seemingly endless stack of AP homework. And thank goodness those tests are finally over. Today, I left my comfort zone to tell you a silly story about ding-dong ditching cookies and hiding in my trunk to do so. Service, even a simple act like this, can change someone's world by giving them an opportunity to smile. When we reach out to serve someone, we're taking that time and choosing to ignore our own problems, no matter how demanding or severe, and to help someone else overcome theirs, no matter how demanding or severe. And when we choose to help someone, we are really helping ourselves too, as it changes our perspective to one more positive. And suddenly, we're not so sad anymore. We can choose to reach out and to help people in our community. So why not brighten their day? Thank you.